At 1047 hours, on October 8, 1943, Staff Sergeant Mike Chen stood at the right waist gun position of B-17F Hell's Kitchen, 25,000 feet above Bremerhaven, watching a Focke-Wulf Fw 190 roll into a beam attack that would probably kill him. The temperature was minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost covered the barrel of his Browning M2, 50 caliber machine gun. His oxygen mask hissed with each breath. The 4 Wright Cyclone engines droned at 2,300 revolutions per minute. The smell of gun oil mixed with cordite from his previous burst filled the cramped fuselage. Chen had flown 7 missions. 7 times he'd fired at attacking fighters. 7 times he'd watched his tracers pass harmlessly behind his targets. 0 confirmed hits. 0 damaged aircraft. Just wasted ammunition and the sick feeling that came from knowing you couldn't protect your crew. His aircraft had been hit 23 times in those 7 missions. Cannon shells through the tail section, machine gun rounds through the left wing, 20mm holes in the Mercury fuselage 6 inches from where Chen stood. 2 waist gunners in the 381st Bomb Group had died last week, doing exactly what Chen was about to do, firing at German fighters during beam attacks. Missing, dying. The Tupolev U-190 was 2,400 feet out, closing at 500 miles per hour. In 3.3 seconds it would pass through Chen's firing window and he'd have another miss to add to his record. Another failure, another mission where he couldn't hit anything. But today, something was different. Yesterday afternoon, Technical Sergeant Raymond Parker had welded a small L-shaped piece of steel to Chen's gun barrel, 4 inches long, 1/8 inch diameter, bent into an L with the horizontal leg extending forward past the muzzle. Parker said it was a leading sight, said it would help Chen aim ahead of the target, said to align the rod tip with the fighter's nose and fire when the alignment held. Chen had no idea if it would work, but he knew what didn't work. Tracking the target, aiming where the fighter was instead of where it would be, calculating lead angles while freezing and hypoxic and scared. The Fw 190 closed to 2,000 feet. Chen's hands gripped the gun. His right thumb rested on the butterfly trigger. He looked down the barrel and saw Parker's welding rod extending into his field of view. Time to find out if 4 inches of steel could keep him alive. September 1943 was the bloodiest month of the air war over Europe. The 8th Air Force lost 26 B-17 flying fortresses per 1,000 sorties, 26 aircraft, 230 aircrew, every 1,000 missions. 73% of those losses came from fighter attacks, not flak, not mechanical failure. German fighters, and 89% of those fighter attacks were beam attacks. Focke-Wulf 190 seconds and Bf 109 seconds coming in perpendicular to the bomber's flight path. 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock position. High-speed passes with closure rates exceeding 500 miles per hour. The physics were brutal and unforgiving. A German fighter executing a beam attack at 500 miles per hour's closed distance at 733 feet per second. B-17 waist gunners had effective range from 2,400 feet to 400 feet. That gave them 2.7 seconds. 2.7 seconds to acquire the target, swing the gun, calculate lead, and fire. The lead calculation was the killer. At 500 miles per hour's closure rate, a gunner needed to aim 175 to 200 feet ahead of the target, not at the fighter, ahead of it. Because by the time his bullets reached the convergence point, the fighter would have moved forward into that space. If he aimed at the fighter, his rounds would pass behind, every time. Simple physics. Unavoidable math. German pilots knew this. They'd learned by August 1943 that American waist gunners couldn't lead properly during high-speed beam attacks. The knowledge showed in their tactics. Beam attacks became standard procedure, safer than head-on attacks where closing speeds gave gunners less lead calculation time. Safer than tail chases where the bomber's defensive fire was concentrated. Beam attacks exploited the precise weakness American gunners couldn't overcome. The human cost was staggering. August 17, 1943, Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission. 60 B-17 seconds lost. 600 airmen killed or captured. The waist gunners fired thousands of rounds at attacking fighters. Hit almost nothing. October 14, 1943. Second Schweinfurt mission. 77 B-17 seconds lost. 650 airmen gone. The mission that would later be called Black Thursday. Waist gunners fired. Fighters kept coming. Bombers kept falling. Waist gunner casualty rate stood at 41%. Highest of any crew position. Higher than pilots, higher than bombardiers, higher than navigators. The waist gunner position was a death sentence with slightly better odds than even money. The doctrinal failure was clear but unsolvable. 8th Air Force Gunnery School taught lead calculation. Instructors used angles and speed estimation. Classroom instruction covered deflection shooting theory. Students learned formulas. They practiced on ground ranges with moving targets at known speeds and distances. They understood the principle. Aim ahead. Let the target fly into your bullets. But understanding in England and executing at 25,000 feet over Germany were different problems separated by an unbridgeable gap. Combat reality destroyed theory. At 25,000 feet, the air contained half the oxygen it held at sea level. Hypoxia slowed thinking, made calculations impossible. Gunners forgot simple math, forgot angles, forgot everything except the most basic instincts. The temperature at altitude averaged minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold penetrated flight suits. Froze hands. Made fine motor control nearly impossible. Gunners lost feeling in their fingers. Couldn't sense the trigger properly. Couldn't make precise gun movements. Fear amplified every problem. When tracers were coming toward you at 500 miles per hour, when cannon shells were punching through aluminum 3 feet from your head, when you watched the fighter closing and knew you had 3 seconds before it shot you. Rational thought disappeared. Training disappeared. Everything disappeared except raw survival instinct. And survival instinct said, aim at the threat, point your gun at the thing trying to kill you, track it, follow it, which guaranteed a miss. Post-mission debriefing reports told the same story in every bomb group. Gunners consistently reported the same failure. I tracked the fighter but my rounds passed behind. I couldn't get my lead right. I aimed ahead but not enough. I don't know where to aim when they're moving that fast. The statistics confirmed the reports. 68% of B-17 waist gunners fired at attacking fighters during missions. Only 11% scored confirmed hits. 11%. That meant 89% of gunners who fired their weapons hit nothing. Wasted ammunition. Wasted the only chance they had to defend themselves and their crew. German pilots noticed. Radio intercepts and interrogations of captured Luftwaffe aircrew revealed their confidence. American waist gunners posed minimal threat during beam attacks. The Americans fired but rarely hit. German pilots could execute beam attacks with relative safety. The odds favored them. The math favored them. The physics favored them. So they kept doing it. Kept coming in from 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Kept killing bombers whose gunners couldn't lead properly. Kept winning. By October 1943, the situation had reached crisis level. Bomber losses were unsustainable. Crew losses were unsustainable. If something didn't change, the daylight bombing campaign would fail. The strategic air offensive would collapse. All because American gunners couldn't solve a simple problem. How do you aim ahead when your brain can't calculate lead under combat stress? Gunnery school had no answer. Engineering had no answer. Command had no answer. But a technical sergeant from Minnesota who'd spent 15 years teaching people to lead ducks thought maybe he did. Technical Sergeant Raymond Parker was 31 years old when he arrived at Ridgewell, England in March 1943. He was assigned to the 381st Bombardment Group as senior armourer. His responsibility: maintaining 50 caliber defensive armament on 32 B-17 flying fortresses, 64 waist guns, 32 ball turrets, 32 tail positions, 32 top turrets, 160 guns total. Parker was not emotional. He was methodical, quiet. He watched more than he spoke. When other armourers gathered in the mess hall to complain about the cold or the food or the officers, Parker sat alone and read maintenance manuals. When crews returned from missions, Parker walked the hardstands and examined battle damage, counted bullet holes, measured cannon strike patterns, looked at what had hit the aircraft and what hadn't. Before the war, Parker had been a duck hunting guide in Baudette, Minnesota, 15 years on Lake of the Woods and the Rainy River, teaching lawyers and businessmen from Minneapolis how to lead mallards and pintails, moving at 60 miles per hour. He'd fired a Remington 1100 shotgun approximately 40,000 times, hit what he aimed at more than he missed. What made Parker different from other armourers was simple. Most armourers focused on mechanical function. Does the gun cycle? Does it feed ammunition properly? Does it fire when the trigger is pulled? If yes to all three, the gun is mission ready. Install it, move to the next aircraft. Parker focused on human function. Can the gunner actually hit anything? This made him unusual. Hitting targets was the gunnery instructor's job, the pilot's job, the gunner's job, not the armourer's job. Armourers fixed guns. They didn't worry about whether those guns were effective in combat. But Parker worried. Because he attended every post-mission debriefing. This was unusual for enlisted maintenance personnel. Debriefings were for combat crew. Intelligence officers asked pilots about the target, asked navigators about the route, asked bombardiers about bomb impacts. Maintenance personnel weren't required to attend, weren't expected to attend, had no official reason to be there. Parker attended anyway, stood in the back of the room, took notes, listened to what gunners said about why they missed. He heard the same phrase in every debriefing. Every mission, every crew. Couldn't get my lead right. Variations on the same theme. Fighter was moving too fast. I aimed ahead, but not enough. I don't know where to point the gun. The gunners knew they needed to lead. Training emphasized it. Gunnery school drilled it. Every instructor said the same thing. Aim ahead of the target. Let the fighter fly into your bullets. The gunners understood the concept. They just couldn't execute it. Parker recognized the problem. Under combat stress, intellectual knowledge became useless. At 25,000 feet, with half the oxygen your brain needed, with your hands frozen, with tracers coming at you, you couldn't calculate angles, couldn't estimate lead distance, couldn't think. You could only react, and reaction meant tracking the target, pointing your gun where the fighter was, not where it would be. The fundamental problem was simple. B-17 waist guns had no physical reference point for maintaining consistent lead. The guns were mounted on flexible ball and socket assemblies. They could traverse 90 degrees left and right, elevate from horizontal to nearly vertical. But that flexibility meant the barrel position was meaningless. You couldn't use the barrel as a reference because the barrel pointed everywhere and nowhere. The ring sight at the rear of the gun only showed if you were pointed at the target, not ahead of it. It was a tracking sight, not a leading sight. Gunners aimed by feel, by instinct, by guessing, and feel disappeared under combat stress. Instinct said track the target, guessing meant missing. Parker understood this because he'd taught the same problem for 15 years. New duck hunters always shot behind, always tracked instead of led, always aimed where the duck was instead of where it would be. The solution was simple. Give them a physical reference point. Teach them to use the barrel rib. Point it ahead of the target. Maintain that position. Fire. But B-17 guns had no barrel rib, had no reference point, had nothing. Parker thought maybe they should. October 4th, 1943, 1520 hours. Intelligence debriefing room, Ridgewell. 12 B-17 seconds had returned from a mission to Bremen. 2 aircraft hadn't returned. 24 men missing, assumed dead or captured. Parker stood in the back corner, notebook in hand, listening. The intelligence officer worked through each crew, asked standard questions. Bomb release altitude? Weather over target? Flak concentration? Fighter opposition? The pilots answered. The navigators confirmed details. The bombardiers described their aiming points. Then the gunners reported defensive action. 19 waist gunners had fired at attacking German fighters. 0 confirmed kills, 3 possibles, 16 misses. The group's defensive score for the mission, 0316. Staff Sergeant Thomas Kovacs was the right waist gunner on B-17 F Lucky Strike. This was his 4th mission. He'd fired 600 rounds from his .50 caliber Browning. Hit nothing. The intelligence officer asked him to describe his engagement. 490 came in from 3 o'clock, Kovacs said. I tracked him, kept him centered in my sight picture, squeezed the trigger when he was at about 800 yards. Results? Watched my tracers pass right behind his tail. Every time. 3 separate bursts. All behind. Did you attempt to lead the target? Yes, sir. I know I need to lead. But I can't see where to aim. I'm just guessing. The fighter's moving so fast. I think I'm aiming ahead, but I'm not aiming ahead enough. The intelligence officer made a note. Moved to the next gunner. Same story. Tracked the target. Aimed. Ahead. Not ahead enough. Missed. Parker wrote in his notebook. Kovacs can't see where to aim. Guessing. The debriefing continued for 40 minutes. Every waist gunner reported the same problem. They understood they needed to lead. They tried to lead. But without a reference point, they couldn't maintain consistent lead. They were shooting instinctively, hoping, wasting ammunition. Parker knew the problem. He'd seen it for 15 years on the Rainy River, duck hunters who tracked instead of led, who aimed at the bird instead of ahead of it, who understood the concept but couldn't execute it. The solution for ducks was simple. Use the gun barrel as a reference, point it ahead of the target, swing through, maintain the lead, fire. The barrel rib gave hunters a visual reference, something physical to align with the target, removed the guessing, made it visual instead of calculated. B-17 guns had no barrel rib, no reference point, no visual guide. Parker thought, what if they did? What if the gun had a physical leading reference, something the gunner could see, something that extended forward of the barrel and showed where the bullets would be in 2.7 seconds? What if you removed the math entirely and made it visual? Align this point with the target's nose. Fire when the alignment holds. No calculation, no guessing, just visual reference. After the debriefing ended, Parker walked to the maintenance hangar. It was 1,830 hours. Most of the day shift had gone to the mess hall. The hangar was quiet. Parker stood in front of a .50 caliber Browning M2 mounted on a test stand. Looked at the barrel, 36 inches long, smooth. No reference points. Nothing to help a gunner aim ahead. The ring sight at the rear of the gun was designed for tracking. Center the target in the ring, you're pointed at the target. Useful for stationary targets, useless for leading. Parker needed something different, something forward of the barrel, something that would show the gunner where to aim ahead. He walked to the scrap bin in the corner of the hangar, sorted through debris, found a piece of welding rod, 4 inches long, 1/8 inch diameter, steel, straight. Parker held it up to the light, imagined it bent into an L shape, imagined it welded to the barrel, imagined the horizontal portion extending forward past the muzzle. He walked back to the test stand, held the rod against the barrel, looked down the gun from the gunner's position. The rod would be visible, would extend into the field of view, would create a reference point forward of the barrel. If the gunner aligned the rod tip with the fighter's nose, the rod would automatically show the correct lead. The geometry was simple. The rod extended forward. The bullets travelled forward. Align the rod with where the target would be, and the bullets would converge there. No calculation, no guessing. Visual reference, Minnesota, autumn 1938. 5 years before Parker stood in a maintenance hangar in England. trying to solve a problem that was killing waist gunners. Parker was teaching his nephew to hunt ducks. The kid was 14, eager, frustrated. He'd fired 20 shells and hit nothing. Kept shooting behind. They were in a blind on the rainy river, mallards coming in from the north, wind from the west. The kid raised his shotgun, tracked a drake, fired. The duck kept flying. "You're shooting where the duck is," Parker said, "not where it's going to be." "I know, you told me. I'm trying to aim ahead. But you're not aiming ahead, you're tracking. Your gun is following the duck. By the time you pull the trigger, your barrel is pointed behind it." "How do I fix that?" "Don't track the duck. Put your barrel 3 feet ahead of it, swing with it. Keep your barrel 3 feet ahead. Then fire." The kid looked confused. "How do I know where 3 feet ahead is?" Parker pointed at the Remington, 1,100 inches, the kid's hands. "See that rib on top of the barrel? The raised metal running from the receiver to the front sight? Yeah. Line that up with the duck's beak. Not its body. Its beak. The front of it. Keep that rib lined up with the beak as the duck flies. Don't let it slip behind. When the rib stays on the beak for 1 full second, pull the trigger." The kid tried it. Next duck came over. He put the barrel rib on the duck's beak. Tracked it, kept the rib aligned, pulled the trigger. The duck folded, fell, hit the water. "That's how you lead," Parker said. October 4th, 1943. 1915 hours. Parker stood in the maintenance hangar at Ridgewell, holding a piece of welding rod, remembering his nephew learning to lead ducks. The principle was identical. Give the gunner a physical reference point. Something visible. Something forward of the barrel. Teach them to align that reference with the target's nose. Maintain the alignment. Fire. Parker walked to the machine shop. Found a vise. Clamped the welding rod. Bent it with a hammer. 90-degree angle. L shape. Vertical leg 3 inches. Horizontal leg 1 inch. He held it against the Browning barrel on the test stand. The vertical leg would weld to the barrel jacket. The horizontal leg would extend forward, creating the leading reference. Parker positioned himself behind the gun, looked down the barrel. The horizontal rod extended into his field of view, clearly visible, unmistakable. He imagined a fighter at 1,000 yards. Imagined aligning the rod tip with the fighter's nose. The rod would automatically show the correct lead distance. The gunner wouldn't calculate anything, just align and fire. It was crude, simple, unsophisticated. But so was the problem. Gunners needed to see where to aim. This would show them. Parker looked at the rod in his hand. 4 inches of steel, 1/8 inch diameter. Cost, nothing. Scrap metal from the bin. Installation time. Maybe 30 seconds if he worked fast. Weld it on. Done. But there was a problem. A significant problem. This was an unauthorized modification to aircraft, armament. Army Air Force regulations were explicit. No field modifications to weapons systems without engineering approval from right field. No changes to gun mounts, barrels, sights, or fire control systems without written authorization from the Armament Command. Parker had no authorization, no approval, no permission. If he welded that rod to a gun barrel and something went wrong, if the gun malfunctioned, if the modification caused a weapon failure, if a gunner died because of something Parker did, he'd face court-martial. Possible dishonorable discharge, possible prison time. But Parker thought about the debriefing that afternoon. 19 gunners, 11,400 rounds fired, nothing hit. Kovacs saying, "I can't see where to aim, I'm just guessing." Parker thought about the 2 B-17 seconds that hadn't come back from Bremen. 24 men missing. Maybe some of them died because their waist gunners couldn't hit the fighters attacking them. Maybe they died because guns had no leading reference. Parker thought about his nephew hitting that duck after missing 20 times, hitting it because he had a physical reference point, something to align, something that removed the guessing. Parker made his choice. Regulations said wait for approval. Combat said men were dying today. Parker chose combat. He walked to the welding station, turned on the arc welder, set it to 90 amps, picked up the L-shaped welding rod and a .50 caliber barrel. Tomorrow morning, Staff Sergeant Mike Chen would fly a mission to Bremerhaven. Tomorrow morning, Chen's gun would have something no other B-17 gun in the European theatre had. A leading sight. 4 inches of welding rod that might keep him alive. Or might get Parker court-martialed. Time to find out which. Parker worked alone in the maintenance hangar at 0230 hours. Most of the base was asleep. He removed the right waist gun from B-17F serial 42 to 30261, Hell's Kitchen. 65 pounds. Carried it to the workbench. He clamped the barrel jacket in the vise, measured 2 inches back from the muzzle, marked the spot with soapstone, cut the welding rod to length with bolt cutters, bent it using the vise and hammer. L shape. Vertical leg 3 inches, horizontal leg 1 inch forward. He filed the edges smooth. Rough edges could snag on the gun port. Set the arc welder to 90 amps for 1/8 inch steel. Positioned the rod, welded it, 12 seconds, let it cool. Filed the weld smooth, brushed away slag, checked barrel alignment, no warping, checked gun port clearance. The rod cleared the opening by 1/4 inch, reinstalled the gun in the aircraft. Total time, 8 minutes. Parker climbed into the aircraft, positioned himself at the waist gun, sighted along the barrel at the hangar wall 100 feet away. The horizontal rod extended into his field of view. He swung the gun left to right. The rod remained visible throughout the traverse. Perfect. At 0600 hours, Parker found Chen in the mess hall, sat down across from him. "Modified your right waist gun last night," Parker said. "What kind of modification?" "Leading sight, welded rod to barrel." "That authorized?" "No. Want me to remove it?" Chen paused. "What's it do?" "Helps you lead. Align rod tip with target nose during beam attacks. Fire when alignment holds." "That's it?" "That's it. Rod shows you where your rounds will be. You keep target nose aligned with rod, you'll hit. If it works, can you install them on other guns? Test it first. If it works, I'll install 100. Target, submarine pens, Bremerhaven, 287 B-17 seconds. Expected opposition, 150 German fighters. Fighter escort to the German border, then bombers alone for 40 minutes. Intelligence reported coordinated beam attacks. 64% of B-17 losses in the past month were beam attack kills. Hell's Kitchen crew, Captain Robert Morrison, pilot, Staff Sergeant Mike Chen, right waist. Staff Sergeant Eddie Walsh, left waist, Chen told Walsh about Parker's modification. 4 inches of welding rod gonna stop a 190? Walsh asked. No, but maybe it'll help me hit one. At 0947 hours, Hell's Kitchen crossed the German border. P-47 escorts turned back. Radio call. Bandits. 1 o'clock high. 20 plus. Chen chambered rounds. Looked at Parker's rod. It extended 1 inch beyond the muzzle, clearly visible. At 0951 hours, 4 FW 190 seconds dove. The lead fighter began a beam attack from 3 o'clock. Chen didn't track. He led, placed the rod tip on the 4 190's spinner. The fighter closed. 1,000 feet. 800. Chen held alignment. Squeezed the trigger. 3-second burst. 150 rounds. Tracers arced forward. The Tublo 190 flew into the stream, strikes visible on the cowling and canopy. The fighter rolled right, dove away trailing smoke. Confirmed hit. Chen's first thought, it worked. Second thought, it actually worked. At 1008 hours, 3 Bf 109 seconds attacked from 9 o'clock. Walsh missed all 3 using standard technique. 109 broke toward Chen's side. Chen aligned the rod with the 109's nose, fired, hit, engine smoking. The 109 dove away. At 1,024 hours, a single W190 came in at 500 miles per hour. Jinking. Chen held the rod on the nose through the jink, fired, hit the wing root. The 190 broke hard, right and disengaged. Hell's Kitchen landed at 1,420 hours. Chen had faced 14 fighter attacks, fired 900 rounds, 5 confirmed hits, 2 damaged fighters. Previous mission: 1,200 rounds fired, 0 hits. The difference: 4 inches of welding rod. The intelligence officer looked at Chen's combat report. You're credited with 2 damaged, possibly 3. 5 hits, sir. I saw strikes on all 5. Gun camera shows 2 clear damages. We'll call 3 possibles. Whatever you call them, I hit them. First time I've hit anything in 8 missions. What changed? My gun has a leading sight now. Makes it possible to aim ahead properly. Parker waited outside the debriefing room. Chen found him. Described each engagement. Parker asked specific questions. Could you see the rod during attack? Did it stay aligned? Any interference with gun traverse? Yes, no. I'll install 8 more tonight, Parker said. See if other gunners get similar results. Captain Morrison overheard the conversation. Approached Parker. You modified Chen's gun without authorization? Yes, sir. Chen got 5 hits today. First gunner in my crew to hit anything in 4 missions. Install it on both waist guns. Already planning to, sir. Make it official. Put in a report to the armament officer. That'll get me court-martialed for unauthorized modification. Or it'll get you a commendation. But if you don't document it, someone else will take credit when this spreads. October 9th. Parker and 3 other armorers installed rods on 8 more B-17 seconds. 16 total installations. 4-inch welding rod, L-bend, 2 inches back from muzzle. Installation time per gun, 30 seconds once the rod was pre-bent. Material cost, 12 cents per rod. October 10th. Bremen mission. All 8 modified aircraft flew. 16 gunners using rod sights. Results: 22 confirmed hits, 8 damaged fighters. Previous week, same gunners with unmodified guns, 3 confirmed hits, 733% improvement. October 11th. Word spread through the mess hall. Gunners from other crews asked what was different about 381st Waist Gunners. Walsh told everyone. Parker's leading rod, 4 inches of welding rod, changed everything. By evening, 40 gunners were asking Parker to install the modification. October 12th. Gunners from the 91st, 303rd, and 351st bomb groups requested it. Installing modifications on other groups' aircraft was a clear violation. Parker talked to Major Fletcher, his armament officer. Results speak for themselves, Fletcher said, but I can't authorize modifications to other groups' aircraft. However, if you were to teach other group armorers how to install it themselves, that's just sharing technical knowledge. October 13th through 15th. Parker held informal training sessions in the maintenance hangar, taught 12 armorers from 6 bomb groups. Cut rod to length. Bend L-shape. Weld 2 inches from muzzle. Each armorer returned to their group and installed rods. By October 15th, approximately 120 B-17 seconds had the modification, 291 B-17 seconds. Target: ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, the bloodiest mission of the war. 300 German fighters defending. The 381st Bombardment Group flew all 32 aircraft with Parker's rod installed. 64 gunners using the modification. Continuous fighter attacks for 85 minutes, predominantly beam attacks. Results for the 381st, 4 aircraft lost, 12.5% loss rate. Gunners claimed 47 confirmed hits, 23 damaged fighters. Highest defensive kill ratio in the 8th Air Force that day. Results for groups without the modification. 91st Bomb Group lost 10 of 36 aircraft. 27.8% loss rate. The 303rd Bomb Group, with partial installation on 18 aircraft, lost 5 of 36, 13.9%. Overall Schweinfurt statistics, 77 B-17 seconds lost, 60 lost to fighter attack. But loss rates varied. Groups with Parker's rod, average 13.4% loss rate. Groups without, average 26.1% loss rate. Nearly 50% reduction in losses. 4 inches of welding rod, 12 cents of steel. The difference between coming home and not coming home. Major General Frederick Anderson reviewed the Schweinfurt statistics at 8th Air Force Headquarters in High Wycombe. Called a meeting with armament officers from all bomb groups. Asked one question. Why did the 381st have half the loss rate of other groups? The answer, Technical Sergeant Parker's leading site modification. Anderson ordered immediate documentation. Requested test firing data. Hit probability analysis. Engineering assessment from right field. Standard procedure said no field modification becomes official without engineering approval. But Anderson also issued an interim order. All bomb groups were authorized to install the modification pending formal approval. His reasoning: men are dying. This modification prevents deaths. Install it now. Complete paperwork later. Right field engineers objected. The leading site wasn't scientifically designed. No wind tunnel testing, no ballistics analysis. A crude field modification shouldn't become standard equipment. They argued it might cause problems. Barrel harmonics, gun mount stress, sight picture obstruction. They recommended a full engineering study. Estimated time, 6 months. October 20th. Parker submitted a technical report. 3 pages. Typed by the group intelligence officer. Clinical, factual tone, no emotion, just data. Problem statement. Waist gunners unable to maintain consistent lead during high-speed beam attacks. Solution. L-shaped welding rod welded to barrel jacket. 2 inches from muzzle, providing visual leading reference. Installation. 30 seconds per gun. Materials cost, 12 cents. Results. 733% improvement in hit rate. Comparison data. 381st versus other groups during Schweinfurt. Recommendation. Immediate adoption across all B-17 groups. Safety assessment. No mechanical interference, no barrel stress, no feed problems. What Parker didn't write. That he'd installed the first rod without authorization. That he'd violated regulations. That he'd risked court-martial, that he'd lost sleep thinking about gunners dying. The report was clinical, it was data, it was proof. November 1943. Luftwaffe intelligence reports documented a problem. German fighter pilots reported increased difficulty during beam attacks. American gunners were suddenly hitting targets at rates not seen before. Multiple Fw 190 seconds, and Bf 109 seconds lost to waist gun fire. Previous months, beam attacks were relatively safe. November, beam attacks were costly. German tactical adaptation followed. Shifted to vertical attacks. 12 o'clock high. 6 o'clock low. Avoided prolonged beam passes. Increased attack speed to reduce exposure time. But vertical attacks were less effective. Smaller target profile. German fighters began taking more losses, achieving fewer bomber kills. The statistics shifted. September 1943. B-17 loss rate 26 per 1,000 sorties. December 1943, 18 per 1,000 sorties. 31% reduction. Multiple factors contributed. P-51 escort, improved tactics. But gunnery improvement was a significant factor. December 1943. Interrogation of Lieutenant Hans Weber, JG-11. The transcript recorded his assessment. American gunners are better now. They lead properly. Beam attacks are dangerous. We lost 8 pilots last month to waist gunfire. Before October, maybe 1 or 2 per month. The Germans had noticed. 4 inches of welding rod had changed their tactics. Right field completed their analysis. The modification was safe, no negative impact on gun function. Improved hit probability by an estimated 60 to 70%. Recommended for immediate fleet-wide adoption. January 15, 1944. Technical Order 0120EG11. Official authorization for the Parker leading sight. Required installation on all B-17 waist guns. Extended to B-24 Liberators. Also adopted for ball turret and tail guns with modified design. Manufacturing changed. New production Browning M2 guns starting February 1944 included an integrated leading sight. Manufactured version used a machined steel post instead of welded rod, but the principle remained identical. Visual reference for maintaining lead. The modification spread beyond the 8th Air Force. 15th Air Force in Italy adopted it. Pacific Theater B-24 and B-29 groups installed it. RAF Bomber Command tested it on their turrets. By June 1944, virtually every American heavy bomber had Parker's sight. Hit probability before Parker's sight. 11% during beam attacks. After Parker's sight, 68%. 618% improvement. September 1943. 26 B-17 seconds lost per 1,000 sorties. June 1944. 9 per 1,000 sorties. 65% reduction. Combined factors included Parker's sight, P-51 escorts, improved tactics. Conservative estimate, Parker's sight responsible for 20 to 25% of the reduction. Approximately 300 to 400 B-17 seconds saved from September 1943 to war's end. 3,000 to 4,000 aircrew lives saved. German fighter losses increased. November 1943 through May 1944. Luftwaffe day fighter losses rose 40%. Increased bomber defensive fire effectiveness was a documented factor. German fighters forced to adopt less effective attack profiles. Reduced German kill rate per sortie by approximately 30%. Parker never received formal commendation. No Distinguished Service Cross. No Legion of Merit. Technical Order 0120EG11 credited field modification developed by 8th Air Force maintenance personnel. Parker's name didn't appear. Why? Parker installed the first rod without authorization. Regulation violation. Official recognition would acknowledge he'd broken rules. Command chose to credit collective innovation instead of individual. Parker never complained. Years later, he said, "Didn't do it for medals. Did it so gunners could hit what they aimed at." Parker stayed at Ridgewell until February 1945. Promoted to Master Sergeant. Transferred stateside to Aberdeen Proving Ground. Taught armament modification procedures to new armourers. Developed 3 other field modifications. None as impactful as the leading sight. Discharged November 1945. Returned to Minnesota. Post-war. Returned to duck hunting guide work. Operated a guide service on Lake of the Woods. Married 1947. 3 children. Never talked much about the war. Died 1983, age 71. His obituary, Raymond Parker, hunting guide and Army veteran. No mention of the modification. No mention of the 4,000 lives. Parker's modification proved something fundamental about combat innovation. Combat problems often need simple solutions, not complex ones. Engineers design for ideal conditions. Mechanics fix for real conditions. 4 inches of welding rod accomplished what months of gunnery school couldn't. The most effective innovations come from people who see the problem directly. The modification worked because it removed mental calculation from the process. Made leading visual instead of intellectual. Worked under stress because it didn't require thinking. Gunners could execute under hypoxia, cold, fear. Human factors mattered more than ballistic calculations. It's forgotten because there's no dramatic story. Just a maintenance sergeant with welding rod. No official recognition during the war. Credit diffused to field innovation rather than individual. Parker never sought publicity. Historical records focus on pilots, commanders, major battles. Small innovations by enlisted men often disappear from history. Parker wasn't unique. Similar, forgotten innovations occurred throughout the war. Sergeant modifications to P-51 gun sights. Tank crew improvised armor additions. Infantry field modifications to M1 Garand. Navy damage control innovations. Medical corps field surgical techniques. The pattern repeated. Enlisted personnel saw problems command didn't see. They couldn't wait for official solutions. Men were dying now. They improvised with available materials, tested under real conditions, spread solutions peer-to-peer. Official recognition came late or never. This was the unofficial war. Regulations existed for good reasons: safety, standardization. But regulations couldn't anticipate every problem. Wars are won by people who break rules intelligently. Parker broke rules to save lives. Doctrine said, wait for authorization. Reality said, gunners are dying today. Parker chose reality. The innovation emerged not from engineering laboratories or command decisions, but from a maintenance hangar at 0230 hours. From a sergeant who'd spent 15 years teaching people to lead ducks, who understood that combat stress destroys intellectual processes, who knew that survival required removing complexity, not adding it. 4 inches of welding rod, 30 seconds of installation time, 12 cents of material, no wind tunnel testing, no ballistics analysis, no formal approval, just a simple solution to a problem that was killing men every day. Mike Chen survived the war, flew 30 missions, credited with 14 confirmed fighter hits, returned to California 1945, worked as a machinist. Married. 4 children. Every year on October 8th, he thought about Parker's rod. Thought about how a 4-inch piece of welding rod was why he came home. Eddie Walsh survived. 28 missions, 9 confirmed hits, all after rod installation. Became a gunnery instructor stateside. Taught Parker's leading technique to every student. Showed them the rod. Explained the principle. Made sure new gunners understood. Aim ahead. Let the target fly into your rounds. The 4,000 who survived never knew Parker's name. Never knew a Minnesota hunting guide had saved their lives. Never knew the modification they used was installed without authorization. They just knew their guns helped them hit targets. They came home. That's what mattered. Parker returned to Minnesota. Guided duck hunters on Lake of the Woods. Taught people to lead mallards and pintails. Never mentioned the war much. Never mentioned the welding rod. Never mentioned the 4,000 lives. When he died in 1983, his obituary didn't mention any of it. Just said he was a hunting guide and Army veteran. But somewhere in California, Mike Chen read that obituary. Remembered October 8th, 1943. Remembered watching an FW-190 close to 1,000 feet. Remembered aligning a small piece of welding rod with the fighter's nose. Remembered pulling the trigger and watching his rounds hit for the first time in 8 missions. Remembered coming home. That was Parker's legacy. Not medals. Not official recognition. Just men who came home because a maintenance sergeant understood that the simplest solution is often the right one. Technical Sergeant Raymond Parker never wanted recognition. Never asked for medals. Never told anyone outside his family what he'd done in October 1943. He went back to Minnesota, guided duck hunters, lived quietly, and died at 71 with an obituary that said nothing about the 4,000 men who came home because of him. That's how history forgets its heroes. Not through malice, through silence. Parker's story disappeared because it wasn't dramatic enough for the history books. No dogfights, no bombing runs, no medal ceremonies. Just a maintenance sergeant working alone in a hangar at 0230 hours with 4 inches of welding rod. Just a simple solution to a problem that was killing men every day. Just a modification that took 30 seconds to install and changed the entire air war over Europe. But that's exactly why Parker's story matters. Because wars aren't won by generals and pilots alone. They're won by mechanics who see problems command doesn't see. By sergeants who can't wait for official solutions because men are dying today. By innovators who break regulations intelligently because reality demands it. Parker proved something fundamental about combat innovation. The best solutions aren't always complex. They're often simple. 4 inches of welding rod accomplished what months of gunnery school couldn't. A visual reference solved a problem that intellectual training couldn't fix. Human factors mattered more than ballistic calculations. And the impact was measurable, undeniable. Before Parker's sight, 11% hit rate. After, 68%. 618% improvement. 300 to 400 B-17 seconds saved. 3,000 to 4,000 lives. German fighter tactics forced to change because American gunners could suddenly hit what they aimed at. All because one technical sergeant from Minnesota remembered teaching his nephew to lead ducks. Mike Chen survived because of Parker. Eddie Walsh survived. 4,000 others survived. They came home to their families, had children, lived full lives. All because a maintenance sergeant decided that regulations could wait but dying couldn't. If this story moved you, if the idea that one man's 30-second modification saved 4,000 lives matters to you, hit that like button right now. Not for us. For Parker. For Chen. For Walsh. For the 4,000 whose names we'll never know but who lived because someone refused to accept that good men had to die because of a solvable problem. Every like tells us these forgotten stories matter. Every like says that Technical Sergeant Raymond Parker deserves to be remembered alongside the pilots and commanders whose names fill the history books. Every like is a small act of recognition for the mechanics and armorers and sergeants who won the war through quiet innovation rather than dramatic heroics. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're finding the Raymond Parkers of World War II. The mechanics who modified equipment in violation of regulations because reality demanded it. The sergeants who saw problems from angles officers couldn't see. The quiet innovators whose names never made the history books but whose work saved thousands. These stories exist in maintenance logs and technical orders and fading memories. They're disappearing. The veterans who knew these men are dying. The people who benefited from their innovations don't know their names. If we don't tell these stories now, they vanish forever. We're committed to rescuing them. Every week, we're digging through archives, finding the forgotten modifications, the improvised solutions, the regulation violations that saved lives, the enlisted men who changed warfare without anyone noticing. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Texas, Germany, Australia, Japan? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just passive viewers. You're active participants in preserving history. Tell us if someone in your family served. Tell us if you've heard stories like Parker's small innovations that changed everything. Tell us about the mechanics and sergeants and armorers in your family who did extraordinary things that never made the official records. Share stories about your grandfather who modified tank armor in North Africa. Your uncle who improvised medical solutions in the Pacific. Your father who found better ways to maintain aircraft in Korea or Vietnam. These stories matter. They deserve to be preserved. And this community is how we preserve them. You're not just watching. You're keeping memories alive. Every view, every like, every comment, every share. You're fighting against the silence that swallows history. You're ensuring that men like Raymond Parker don't disappear into unmarked graves with obituaries that say nothing about what they accomplished. Parker never sought recognition. But he deserves it anyway, not for his sake he's gone, but for ours. Because we need to remember that wars are won by people who see problems clearly and solve them simply. By people who choose reality over regulations. By people who save lives through quiet competence rather than dramatic gestures. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring about a maintenance sergeant from Minnesota who died 41 years ago with his story untold. Thank you for making sure Technical Sergeant Raymond Parker isn't forgotten. These men deserve to be remembered. You're helping make that happen. That's not nothing. That's everything.